Hello and welcome. I'm Jenny Hall. Thanks for joining me for another card making tutorial. Today I'm stamping with Sharing Sweet Thoughts stamp set, and I'd like to share my methods for creating watercolor with a sense of depth or dimension. I'm using the jar image from Sharing Sweet Thoughts, and as soon as this stamped jar hits the watercolor paper, I immediately start moving around the stamped lines on the inside of the image to blur that original stamped line and give it just a little bit more depth and dimension. For the contents inside the jar, I'm going to do no line watercoloring. I like to use Sahara sand or another very light ink, and I used a second generation so that the ink will not show through on the finished coloring job. Using Real Red, I'm giving a very light coat of ink on each of the individual strawberries. I'm careful not to color next to the one that it is. I don't want to color a strawberry and then have the ink bleed into the next strawberry. So I skip over and make sure one's dry before I do the next door neighbor image. Once my base color is in, then I can really go for the shadow work and give that depth some very, very dark tones. I've used Berry Burst, and I've gone as deep down into the shadows as I can, and then I slowly work the dark color towards the light. The great thing about using an aqua painter is that you can give a little bit more pressure to help dilute the color if you need to. I've done the same thing on the stems. I used 2 greens. And once this image is dry, I'm able to use a black journaling pen to go and add the little seeds that I can now see very clearly on each strawberry. I could still see them through the red color that was stamped in brown. It worked out very well. I'm going to do some die cutting, and I'll cut out the dies of Everyday Jars framelits. They work perfectly with the stamp set, so I'll have the lid and the jar all cut out from the watercolor paper. Perfect. Looking into this die set a little bit more, I decided that the card needed more than a jar of fruit. So I'm going to create something that looks like a stem of strawberry flowers. That's part of the attractiveness whenever I look at strawberries that are being grown, is those pretty white flowers with the delicate yellow brown centers. So I've used this little stem that it doesn't exactly look like what the strawberry would, but that's okay. It's interpretive art. And I've added a coat exactly the same way that I colored the stems of the strawberries with the same ink pads. And now I'm taking 3 little flowers that were from the same die set, and I've die cut everything in watercolor paper. First I wet the entire flower with the clean aqua painter, and now I'm just going in and dabbing some of crushed curry into the center. Each drop that I add just expands and soaks into the paper to blend out very nicely. I've used more Sahara sand to give a bit of definition to the petals very lightly, and to also dot down in the center as a layer on top of the yellow. Now this is going to give me that dimensional look to each one of the flowers. It's not going to just look flat. It's going to look like the flower is actually like you're looking at it from a different perspective. My card front is created with 2 pieces of Whisper White. One is cut 1/8 of an inch smaller than the other, and I'm going to just add these elements to the front of the card. I'll use some Stampin' Dimensionals on the jar, and I'll use lots and lots of glue dots on these little flowers. I find that using glue dots is a wonderful way to get watercolor paper to stay put. So the watercolor paper might not want to adhere to liquid glue, but the glue dots are ultimately more sticky for me, so I tend to stick with the glue dots. For a sentiment on the jar, I thought it would be nice to create it in the style of a tag. I'd like you to notice the coloring on the flowers and the strawberries. The photographs that I took that are at the end of the video do not quite show the depth of color that you see right here in the video. That's because as the paper continued to dry more and more, when I took a photograph, the light is going to catch all of the fibers that were stirred up on the top of the page. So if you have some sort of a incident like that, when you photograph something that was manipulated with watercolor, then don't dismay. You didn't do anything you were not supposed to do. There's one trick that I'll share with you. I didn't use it here, but I wish I had. I will take a Q-tip and a little dab of petroleum jelly and very carefully wipe it over the area that I would like to have saturated. And do you know that it will really, really intensify the colors? I forgot about it until after I had taken my photographs, but I did notice that the photographs, the colors came out much more light. You'll see it right here. That intensity is gone. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. All of the products that I have used are available until May 31st in my online store. This stamp set will be retiring. I'm sad to see it go, but you can get it now at jennystampsup.com and click on Shop Now. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll see you in the next video.
Thanks for watching the video. Have a good day!